Welcome to Affinity, a Fin Partners podcast where we educate and explore the impact of transformative marketing communications. My name is Aleksandra King. On today's episode, join us as we delve into how brands connect with their audiences, how ideas are sparked, and how innovative storytelling earns attention and drives results. Elliott and Paul, thank you very much for joining us on the Affinity Podcast. Could you tell us a little bit about your backgrounds and your role in digital marketing? Elliott, you first.
So I'm a managing partner in Fin Partners. We're a multinational, fully integrated marketing and PR agency, global in nature. I'm a managing partner based in the London office, and I head our European integrated marketing teams.
And I am the head of customer data and digital marketing for Wagamama, a pan-Asian, UK and gradually becoming global casual dining brand.
What sparked your interest in data-driven marketing?
I'm a first principles thinker. With that, I always try to drill down to what's the underlying reason for X, Y, and Z in anything in life, not just look at the end product, but how does it come about? And when you naturally think like that, you realize that what's driving digital is data.
And I think, look, for my side, not many people may know this, but today I'm a managing partner. A lot of what I do is business development, customer relationships. But I started out life as a programmer, very, very technical, totally focused programmer. And that was what I did for the first 10, 15 years of my career. And I think as I moved into marketing, I learned to love marketing. I learned to love, branding and all of that subjective, soft stuff that goes along with marketing. But I never really lost my passion for programming and digital stuff. So data-driven marketing sits at the intersection between, I think, those two skill sets.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so let's unpack that term, data-driven marketing, and how it differs from traditional marketing.
I guess having the customer at the core is probably the most modern definition. 10, 15 years ago, just buying Facebook ads instead of buying billboards would have been data-driven marketing. So I guess it's evolving. As it stands right now, within the way I see it, I would define a data-driven media campaign where you're targeting your own customer data. For example, people who you know are likely to buy product X or be interested in product X with a different message than those who are relevant for product I. That's highly data-driven. Whereas if you were just going out and have a Facebook ad to anyone who's interested in certain name of your brand, then you're sort of data-driven, but I feel that definition it belongs to the past now.
Data is as an input to marketing in general, but specifically when we're talking about digital marketing, is absolutely fundamental. But if you can create that feedback loop where you're using it as an input into an idea of how you want to go to market, whether that's messaging or targeting or obviously a combination of both of those things. If you can then get the feedback based on how those prospects responded or engaged with that advertising or marketing message,
exactly,
and then you push that back into the front end again, then your marketing becomes more intelligent. It becomes more efficient, and therefore you're able to get more reach and engagement, and ultimately more return on investment. So that's why it's not just a buzzword, it's absolutely fundamental.
Let's say I want to run a campaign towards, let's say I want to drive click and collect, which is a very small part of our business, but a lot of people do enjoy the opportunity to pick up their own food, whether they just like to walk or because that's what's available to them. Let's say they have consented for us to use their data. So we know a few thousand who like click and collect, potentially could share that with an advertising platform and say we would like to find people who are similar to these customers who enjoy click and collect. Then that advertising platform will, as an aggregate, look at the general profile of the group you've shared, probably thousands of data points, and find other people who would belong to a group, that other people who would have belonged to that group had they already been Wagamama customers. So you find people who are similar, but they aren't Wagamama customers. That's the lookalike audiences. And that they may be presented with an advertising where we present our click and collect proposition, and they have the opportunity to go and try it should they choose to.
Okay, so how have recent privacy laws affected your marketing strategies?
There's various versions of the European GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations, and there's similar versions in the States and other markets around the world. So it's definitely affected the way marketers use data, significantly. Broadly speaking, the way that the platforms, so the social media platforms, Google search as a platform, so these digital marketing platforms that have enabled advertisers to go and reach customers either based on their search behavior or based on their profile data, if it's a social network, they've largely been able to mitigate the impact, so you can still have the ability to be very targeted. Where it has had an impact is the way that customers deploy some of their first of all, how they collect their first party customer data, how they store it, and then how they use it. But largely speaking, most progressive marketing agencies and the clients that they work with, they're still able to be exceptionally data driven in the way that they approach and stay within those new regulations.
I have our data privacy officer, or DPO, and the legal team on speed dial. I ask about everything I do to make sure that we always review and we're compliant. I even asked about coming here today, if that was something they were comfortable with, which they were actually quite excited about. So I take that as a yes.
Great, good.
So that's really positive. In terms of the privacy laws, we are seeing the death of the third-party cookie. So I guess what that does is it forces brands and the tech platforms like Meta and Google and others to collect, to sort of involve you more in the decision to share your data. It forces them to want to set up a first-party data tracking, to share your email. And you can expect then, as a customer, that if you give this brand your email, you will be receiving more personalized marketing. You may be receiving discounts. So it's more that you're receiving a trade. And now that we have this first-party tracking, you can then go ahead and be more transparent, which is where we should be going anyway as a business, where there's a more overt trade of value, that I know that X brand knows a lot about me, but they are offering a great service. I like their emails because it's for me. And on occasion, I get rewarded. So it's more the overt landscape, whereas the old school cookies are a little bit more shady. You don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because cookies are now being phased out. And I mean, that's going to change how we deploy our marketing strategies. And we need to find new innovative ways to get that information and more information.
Yes.
I think the biggest change is really about how you track and report on performance.
Yes.
And that's that has been a challenge when you're talking about attribution modeling. You want to understand, what campaigns, what messages, what channels are driving those results. So tracking for those reasons is really, really important. But as I said, so most of the channels have been able to work around that to a certain extent by using aggregated, anonymized data. So there are routes around these challenges if you have the right agency partner, of course.
So at Wagamama, do you offer something back to your customers for the trade of that information?
Yes. As we've been gradually implementing first-party data the last 3-4 years, I've always been very focused that our emails, first and foremost, are relevant and good, and then gradually implemented some personalization in them. For example, in New Year's Eve 2022 and then repeated in 2023, we did, I guess internally we call it Wrapped, like Spotify Wrapped was the original doing that. What I call that data story of your year with the brand. For us, we share that your favorite restaurant was X, your favorite dish was Y, this food category was your favorite, you came X times, and we think based on what you've paid for on your bill the last year, you would also like these dishes. So it's a very data-driven email, but it's fun, and I enjoy, for example, receiving all these types of emails, which most brands now are doing, to be fair. But that's the sort of experience customers are starting to expect.
Yeah, and I think building on that type of personalized feedback, if it's done correctly, you're creating a more personalized experience for your customer. And I think the analogy is it's like having a private chef serve up the precise dish that is right for you in terms of your tastes and your food intolerances or whatever it might be, as opposed to going into a kind of school dinners type scenario where there's just one option and it's
you don't want unnecessary things pushed on you. We're too busy for that. So yes, you would expect this trade like you're successfully doing at Wagamama's, which was the question with a customer, and you give in the customer something of real value in return for that very precious data. But I suppose this follows on to how do you balance these commercial interests with the privacy concerns of these individuals?
It's interesting because I think we need to be fair with each other as consumers and as brands. We all know how the game's played. There is a commercial interest, and there is a product that we're hoping you're happy with. So you want to trade with us. That makes sense. So essentially, the value proposition we're offering is a good restaurant experience and a good digital experience. We actually want to have build an experience where you can almost enjoy reading about our privacy policy, which is, of course,
I don't think anyone does that. I don't think, no, but you can imagine, when you read I don't think many people read those T's and C's. They sort of click, go on. But my question was, how do you educate your customers?
So when you opt into the Wagamama database through any channel, there's a link to the privacy policy in the terms and conditions. That's the channel through which you're educated. And of course, it's always mentioned at the bottom of our emails. Again, yeah, it's always repeated. It's there if you're interested in it. And I think that's a fair exchange, but we want to make it an even better experience. But I can't speak too much more about that. What I can say is we have a very positive intent. And also, I don't necessarily think it's just about digital experiences they're expecting. They are, me as a consumer, I would be expecting that a brand I trade a lot with would offer me some sort of discount or something special at the end of all those trades, despite having experienced them very positively. And that's also, I think, the way we are going to go in terms of consumers having more power to expect a more fair exchange from their data.
Does this sort of change which brands you would ever sign up with, knowing what you know on this whole digital front, the data front? Are you more careful as a consumer who you hand your data to? No,
I'm the opposite. I give as much data as I can because I want to see what they can do. Show me what you got.
Okay, so you're researching.
When I opt in my head, I'm challenging them. Come on, impress me.
Okay.
But of course, if you're a sensible person, which of course I'm not, you do the opposite to a certain degree.
Elliott, I think you're the opposite, or
I certainly in the early days of social media, I would do things like not put my real date of birth and things like that, because look, I think data privacy in terms of the way that we interact with these organizations is regulated by these regulations that we're talking about. And like we said, in the main, most brands and organizations, because it makes commercial sense, want to do the right thing by their customers, because if you don't, ultimately customers will move away. However, obviously the problem with giving away data is you're exposed to other threats, like these organizations can be hacked, for example.
Agreed.
And data can be stolen. So there's still an issue.
There's a trick though that I often use. First and foremost, sometimes I don't give my exact name. It's close enough so that feels like it's for me. On occasion, and this is cheeky, I might put the name of that brand as my middle name, so that when they say hi, me. If they've sold my data, I know who sold my data. And additionally, I'll give the data.
How interesting.
I'll give a date of birth that's roughly correct, so that my customer profile falls within the right age segment, so I can see they're doing that right. But I won't give my exact date of birth, so that they can't really steal my identity when I don't have the absolute correct name and the absolute correct date of birth. So it's sort of like I'm giving them what they need to make a great experience, but I'm reducing the threat against my profile and my data.
That's just so interesting. I might I might copy that. Okay, so we're going to move away from the consumers. We're going to go back to, companies like Wagamama.
Yep.
And Wagamama is collecting this data, and then at some point you decide maybe you want to collaborate with other brands, and then how does all that work? That sharing of information to enhance the overall marketing experience.
Well, it's something that's technically possible within a legal framework to collaborate on data through something called data clean rooms, where a anonymized version of something like an email can be shared, and then other brands could, in theory, upload anonymized versions of their own data, so you can compare the lines of data between them and see what overlaps, but you don't know who's in the set. So it's more of an aggregate secret combination, so to speak. Now, at this point in time, we haven't really gone deeply into this, and there's something that would have to be deeply considered with the legal team and anything like that. So I don't think that necessarily something that you get much value from speaking about today. But the opportunity to collaborate brand to brand, I think, is going to become bigger for all brands. I think it's even going to become normal. Let's say you wanted to collaborate. Let's say you're a restaurant chain and you want to collaborate with a retail chain. You have you have products in a retail store. You could, in theory, work with their loyalty program like the Club Card, Tesco, or the Nectar, and you could see an anonymized overlap of people who go to a restaurant who also buy your meal kits in store. So there's a lot of opportunities to overlap should you want to, and which doesn't risk any user data. But that's quite an advanced use case. But it's definitely going to become mainstream. Is my guess.
The future.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, look, brand collaborations across many different industry sectors, it's really effective way of marketing, particularly, where there's lots of crossover between the customer and consumer types. When it comes to sort of regulations, you've got this concept of the data controller and the data processor, and the data controller is the company that owns that customer data, or as the customers have opted in to provide that data to that company. And there's obviously limitations about how much of that data they can share. They can allow agencies, for example, and appropriate third parties to process it in some circumstances. Yep. But brand collaborations are not going to go away, right? Because they're super effective. So we're working, for example, with a manufacturer in the B2B sector, and they're working with one of their reseller partners. And that manufacturer has got some performance marketing campaigns that are set up and optimized to go after the sorts of customers using some of their own first party data. And we were able to form a collaboration that sits very comfortably within the regulations, but worked out as a win-win for both of those partner brands. But crucially, in part because of the power of personalized and targeted marketing, it's really effective for those business prospects, that their end customers that they're targeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so how has real-time data transformed the way that you engage with your customers?
The way to think about real-time data, it's like using a GPS when you're driving somewhere. So as you move from your origin point to your destination point, that GPS is able to pick up on traffic data, so that if there's a shorter cut, it can reroute you in real time. So using real time data in marketing is very similar, right? You're getting feedback, so you can make real time decisions or near real time decisions based on the data that you're coming back, and you can alter the course of your marketing, whether that's about the messaging, or whether it's about the targeting, or the geographic or time, a place that you're serving these ads, and so on and so forth.
Imagine you're walking through a hallway, and you can gradually learn how those who ended up buying, where they were at the different stages on their hallway. And after a few thousand of those walks down the hallway, you know that if user X is not standing on the right side of the hallway at that point, they're unlikely to buy. So you're going to have to, with data, try to nudge them over to the left side, so they end up in the perfect path down to the final checkout. That's a very conceptual example, but that is what's happening using different copy, different imagery, different messaging, all sorts of things you can do to nudge forward. So essentially, the system learns as it goes. And I think that's just the start of where we are in commerce and experience, to be honest.
Okay, this leads us perfectly on to the next question, which is the integration of AI in creating a personalized marketing experience. So how does that then sit on top of what you just said, which is already so intelligent? I mean...
Yeah, it's interesting because there's some small AI use cases we do employ, but as it stands, we as a business haven't really ventured into AI because we don't think it's being on the side of the customer. We don't think it's necessarily compliant, because right now it would take a lot of build and knowledge and investment to build out AI solution that we can be certain are compliant and there are no data leaks, that we can confidently put our business information into. If we were to just use the services online, in theory, it could mean we are sharing proprietary data with the likes of OpenAI and Microsoft, which, if contractually agreed upon and ring-fenced, could in theory be okay, but you can't do that without the right investment, the right contracts. So I would urge people and companies to be careful how they use AI. As a rule of thumb, if I were to use AI for something just in my day-to-day job, I would never use an AI tool on data that's not public already. So let's say I want to analyze our reviews for a sentiment, that's public data. So I would be comfortable sharing a list of reviews to a tool like ChatGPT and say, can you analyze the sentiment? Because that's already out there. And people have freely accepted the terms and conditions to giving that review to Google or TripAdvisor, for example. So that's fine. In terms of what we do in our customer data tool, we have a couple of AI functions that tries to learn that people who frequently order this dish often end up liking that dish. Or you can see that you can do one of the more predictive analysis. We can see that this guest profile seems to be on a path to lapsing from you as a guest. So you might want to push out a campaign to say, hello, don't forget us, we love you, which of course we do. So it's a lot of these small things you can do without being worried about compliance, but be very careful and know what you do and work with your legal team and IT team and tech team before you start using any sort of internal data in any of these services.
I think, it's just wonderful at Wagamama that you understand all of this. You know that there's legal implications, you know about the compliance laws and all of that, and that you care deeply about your customers. You would never jeopardize them in any way, shape, or form for the latest trend, the latest fad. I think that's just amazing. It's great ethics, and No,
I think it's part of the brand. It's one of the sentences I hear almost every day at work is being on the customer side in some way, shape, or form. And I think it's the right way to trade, so to speak. It's part of the brand.
It's incredible.
AI has the ability to connect disparate systems in a relatively intelligent way.
Exactly.
And I think that's a really, really big opportunity going forward for using AI in marketing and actually beyond.
I don't think I'm not going to go off too much of a tangent here, but I think what we're going to see fairly soon, if not already, is different GPTs from different tools who work together. So let's say ChatGPT that you want an email campaign built. Let's give an example. Okay, ChatGPT reaches out to Canva GPT and say, hey, can you make this? And Canva GPT say, here we go. And then ChatGPT pivots up to email GPT and say, hey, can you use this in a campaign and propose a copy? Email GPT replies to ChatGPT, and you have these pivots and spins going on until you have an output you can assess. And then you can go back to the core in this example, ChatGPT, and say, what's this? Do this all over again, not good enough. Or you can say, this is brilliant, remember this next time, or something in between. Yeah. So it's all about these dominoes or pivots. I think right now we are the pivot. I joked a couple of weeks ago that we have become the API. The human is now the API between the AI systems. Which it's completely turning it on its head, and that's obviously the start of the machine revolution and our downfall. They're already training us. I don't actually believe that, just that said. That I think it's an hilarious take to see that suddenly we are serving them in some sort of weird way.
Yeah.
So it's quite funny.
Just don't give them, any heavy machine guns or anything like that.
No, they'll invent light. They'll invent light machine guns. Don't you worry.
Right. Okay.
What other future trends do you foresee in identity tracking and marketing?
I feel that the identity layer that the internet was never really built with is gradually coming in, not necessarily because it's a physical layer being built in. It's a metaphor for the changed business, government, and user behavior, where higher percentage of your time online is being spent logged in with your profile. All of your time in most social media platforms is logged in. That's probably 60 to 80% of a lot of people's online time, if not more. But now you're also doing it on websites. You're doing it on payment services like Wagamama's Pay on Phone. You identify yourself. You identify yourself when you log into the government website, HMRC, which of course helps if you want to do your tax. So there's practical use cases. But there are also situations where, why do you have to be logged into Google to do a search? Well, they're offering a more personalized and adapted search, but you are getting used to telling Google everything about yourself, right? And all the other services, so suddenly the profile that used to be a cookie is your email. Does that make sense? Yeah. The good thing is that there's now a fair value exchange, at least if you think about it, that you only give your data to businesses who will give you something in return, as I spoke about earlier. But I do think we are looking at a new identified internet. And then I think, as we also spoke about brands, for example, could end up collaborating using a pseudonymized or anonymized version of your profile to compare it and aggregate to what other brands have and what media providers can do. So I think in ways we are better off, but we're still a little bit dancing to the same tune as we were with the cookies, to a certain degree, I guess.
Yeah, I think like the concept of identity is a really big topic, and there's so many layers to it. But I actually agree with Paul. I think if you look at the current internet today, and you spoke to most users around the world, what's the biggest problem with it? Well, you have to log in into all of these disparate devices. You've got most people have different email addresses, different passwords, or you're reusing the same password all over the place, which has a security impact in of itself. So if you were to redesign, if you like, the internet from day one, I'm absolutely sure you would design it with identity right at the center of that system. I think the challenge always will be, as far as I can see, is yes, you can have this single identity that you log into that then allows you to connect all of these different services that you want to give those services the permission to access elements of your identity as opposed to loading all of your identity data onto those third-party services and then hoping they manage them correctly. The problem with that is you still need some sort of arbitrator of that core identity data. So is that the UK government? Is it the US government? Is it the EU? Is it someone else? Is it Facebook? Is it Google? Probably most people wouldn't be comfortable with any of those answers.
Nope.
So it's a major challenge with lots of implications.
Yes, it's a fantastic analysis, because I think having a centralized, as you say, identity would be perfect. And in theory, that's the government, but it's not always straightforward, is it? It really isn't.
So what have been some of the surprising findings that have come through from your data analysis regarding consumer behavior? And this is at Wagamama's.
We started realizing that people were ordering tap water with their food, and that had increased by quite a lot. And we were pondering what was going on. We suspected, and I think we were right, that it was a reflection of the cost of living crisis. Now, you could potentially, some might then interject and say your juices are too expensive, but they haven't really gone up that much beyond the normal market in the UK. So I suspect that that's a signal of the cost of living crisis. Another one I would say is more of an interesting insight is there are a few people who treat a visit to Wagamama as like a tapas visit, where they don't order a main. They order several sides and they share, which is actually quite fun to see. And there's one thing, I haven't really had the bandwidth to do that, but I do want to explore that segment more and see if there's something interesting we can do for them to create mutual value, as I like to say.
What about data sort of coming in? Let's say you send emails to your customers. What about that? Is there some analysis there that you found that's strange or striking? Or
in terms of engagement, people are very deliberate in how they engage with what they receive. I initially thought, just 2, 3, 4 years ago, I thought that a lot of people ignored our email due to overwhelm of the inbox.
Yeah.
But I can see based on what the email contains, and for example, if there's an offer in there, which is something we do sometimes, especially in some trial areas, then the engagement is much higher, which means there is a screening. There's a screening process. They're challenging us as a brand, what we offer, how we communicate it, and what we talk about. We also see, obviously, that our new menu launches are really highly engaging, which is brilliant to see. And again, it underpins the point that people are selective in what they engage with, which again is a challenge to me as a marketer and us as a brand. So I welcome that.
So is that in the subject of the email or in the email itself, or both?
Both. The subject we try to make our subjects, at least to a certain degree, fairly informative.
Yeah.
But often when you go beyond the subject, you click into the email, we can see that the content obviously will drive the next action, and we can see quite a lot of different outcomes based on what we talk about.
Can I just ask, do you use video in your content?
Not in emails. We may link to videos, which we have, but we it's not possible, as far as I'm aware, to embed video in an email. We do use animated GIFs, which generally are well received.
Okay, so what are some of the main misconceptions businesses have about becoming truly data-driven?
Yeah. I think to get started, it's a mindset. Even if you're just a fairly small business and you're not doing a lot, just asking the question, can we use data to make this better? You already have a little momentum because your mindset's just changed. So I think that's barrier number one, to see the value and change your own behavior to data-driven. And after that, I suspect it's looking at customer data first. If obviously you have to set up a compliant system and a compliant capture and do all the legal bits and pieces, but then you can start experimenting by sending different messages to different people based on very small differences, just so you start learning. So I think just changing your mindset and trying is going to break down those barriers for you, and you'll start actually becoming quite excited about the opportunity if you're running a business.
Yeah. And I think, look, another challenge is quite a practical one. There's just so much data. Because when we say data, some people might be thinking about customer data on a CRM or something like that. But obviously there's behavioral data. There's how those customers or lookalikes of those customers, how they act on third-party channels, whether that's search or YouTube or in the real world or on social media channels. And then there's, competitor. There's data about your competitors. There's data about, third-party influences that are going to impact an industry, socio-economic factors. So we're just awash with data, and it's like what data do I use to, for this particular marketing tactic, for this particular objective? Yeah. But then you've got to look at that within the context of your marketing strategy and the business strategy more broadly. And what data do I draw down on? And this is where I think it comes down to the channel and the tactical specialist knowledge that you need to be able to understand for a search engine optimization campaign. This is the type of data I need on user behavior. Yep. This is the type of data I need to understand about my competitors. This is the type of data I need to understand about my existing and potential customers. So I think the short answer is having access to the right specialists and advisors who can work with you to access the specific data that you need to make that tactic perform as well as it can.
So to simplify that a little bit, so the operational challenges you face are get the mindset right first, then employ the right people. So that requires, you need the resources to do that. What else? Because it's very sophisticated, I would say, what you're implementing here.
I think it's sophisticated if you look at it on a macro level, but it's like, it's the old adage, how do you eat an elephant in small pieces?
Yes.
And this is kind of what I'm saying is you've got, and typically in-house brands and the CMOs and potentially the CEOs, they're going to be the owners of the strategy. They understand what it is they need to do. They understand their brand better than anyone, alongside their customers, I would say. And then, whether it's agencies or internal staff or these marketing specialists, wherever they come from, it's their job to go a level down and work on a tactical level. And it's their job to understand, what data is needed and how to use it.
Yep. No, spot on. It's that easy and that hard.
Yeah.
Really is.
Yeah. It requires trust, right? It
Yes,
requires
that's
trust between these different players that you need to pull together to execute an integrated strategy of this type.
Patience, and it's also an educational piece. Attribution modeling, for example. How do you? One thing is finding a way or setting up some tracking or structures or do an analysis on how your campaign is performing. Another thing is to transfer that knowledge to stakeholders who may sit at a strategic level. How do you sort of make them trust that your metrics are correct? How can you trust your metrics are correct if have you set up correctly? You need to work with the right specialist, but you also need to communicate in the right way.
Okay, well, let's take that a little bit deeper into the technological infrastructure that you need in order to support this advanced tracking. So can you talk a bit more about that?
The Muppet Show, the two old men on the balcony.
Okay.
That's Google and Meta sitting on your website, their cookies, watching your customers go through the checkout funnel, and they have a pen and they're counting. That's right. So Meta sees one, Google sees one, and then they check. Well, did we send this cookie here? Yes, we did. That's one from us. So
Okay.
Google then says this ad that I served gave you this sale, right? So when the cookie goes away, the old men are retired. There's nobody on the balcony anymore. So then what you come back to you needing first-party data, right? So now you have, you're tracking, who made a purchase with you, because obviously you can't really fulfill an e-commerce purchase if you don't know the customer details or an email. So you now hold these emails. And what our friends, the old men on the balcony, they've now moved to a mansion. So you now send information hashed about who have made a purchase in your business, which arrives at their mansion, and they check their data. Yeah, we served an ad to this profile. We did this. So instead of them sitting on a balcony observing, they've moved to a mansion, and you're telling them whether they're obviously in a hashed way, whether they've delivered the ad. And that's actually most British businesses, I would say, probably has what's called server-side tracking or Facebook Conversion API, which is the new technology, in place or about to have it in place. So that's how you've actually, in a compliant and first-party data way, have recovered quite a lot of what the cookie could offer. There's also a middle layer where there's predictive modeling or statistical modeling of those who have rejected the cookies that you can't see. But theoretically, based on the patterns, these many of those anonymous ones would also have converted. Right. So you have a statistical modeling you can use, or you can use the CAPI or Conversion API, which was my metaphor of sending it to the old men in the mansion at this point.
At the end of the day, from a marketing perspective, what we're really interested in is about using, we've said it a few times now, using the right data as the right type of input into the right tactic, deployed in the right way so that it's underpinning, an integrated strategy.
Yeah.
Where there's this kind of holistic view about the journey and the experience that we want to provide for our customers.
Yes.
Okay, so where do you see the biggest opportunities for data-driven marketing?
The biggest opportunity, I think, for us is to build that segment of one relationship where you feel that the brand know you so well that everything you receive is brilliant. Yes, this is exactly what I want. And in the long term, and now I'm completely speculating, is I could see whether we or other brands or the industries offering almost personalized menus, digital versions, when you arrive to the restaurant. I can see a situation where you ask for a menu version that sort of leads into your taste or if you feel adventurous, you can ask for a taste breaker menu where you only see dishes that you haven't really tried or types of dishes you haven't tried.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going with this, I think. So that's a long-term opportunity. The short-term opportunity is provide the segment of one experience where you really get back from the experience. You get back what you put into Wagamama, so to speak.
Yeah, I completely agree with Paul there. In the short term, data-driven marketing for those brands and organizations that are not already using it, they need to start. There are many organizations that are kind of partially using it. They need to get better because they need to be, they need to be more competitive.
Yep.
So that they can grow and thrive in their industry sectors. But I think the really interesting part is this medium and longer term opportunity. For a long time now, marketers have been talking about the promise of ultra personalization, which is what Paul talks about. I actually think, my personal opinion is that artificial intelligence, we spoke about where it might be able to, really change the game. Mm-hmm. And for me, if we do get the type of artificial intelligence that some technology providers are promising, so it's a really, really intelligent personal assistant that actually understands me, and Paul's personal assistant will understand him and the nuances of him, and so on and so forth. If we can have that type of artificial intelligence that obviously goes way beyond the existing Alexa and Siri, which is kind of bulky, let's be honest. If we can have that type of intelligent personal assistant that can interact with not just the worlds of websites and the internet as we know it, but the promise of the Internet of Things and all of these devices that will be connected also potentially intelligently via AI, then we have the opportunity to have really ultra personalized experiences that are curated in some ways without even our knowledge. So we just get to experience that personalization as opposed to have to drive it or opt in or opt out or otherwise.
Anyone who knows me knows that I would say humor is my number one communication method, even when I'm dead serious. And this just fell into my head and I can't unsee it. Mm-hmm. Imagine, this is a sad story. Okay. It's two neighbors, right? Imagine two neighbors, they're really good friends. And one day they both get an AI assistant, right? Mm-hmm. And this AI assistant is now responsible for their individual emails. That means, right at this point, from this very point in time, you're doing SEO to reach your neighbor. You basically have you put a gatekeeper in front of your neighbor. Mm. Your friendship is now managed by your AI. So I can see now sad violin music as the years go by and none of them can get past each other's gatekeepers with their messaging. So they're having this little email exchange, but they never meet again because the AI gatekeeper is blocking them. And the reason this is funny is because we are actually about to enter a world where people, let's say Elliott and I work together, and your AI rejects my emails. It doesn't think they're relevant. So I can't get through to you.
Surely that's not the future.
I can't get through you. No, obviously that's a funny version of it, but I can see that it becomes a thing where you have an AI assistant who dismisses something you didn't want to dismiss.
I guess your AI assistant is only as intelligent as the information you feed it.
Correct. So of course I could tell it to always let Elliott's messages through. I'm not. I would never do that. Of course, I do want them filtered out. But in general, yes, I'm sure I could set exclusions. But you could miss out on some good things.
Yes, but anyone listening to this as a consumer or as a business would see both sides. So as a consumer, you feel more empowered, to interact with these brands in the right way so that you're getting that personal, information that's actually helping you make the right decision, whether that's buying clothes or whatever. It's just more focused. It's saving you time. It's more efficient. And then you're happy to share that data for that reason because you're getting a better, outcome.
Yes.
And then for brands as well to have that transparency, that honesty about, the exchange, you give us this and then also helping target because you only want to give your customers what they'll buy, what they want to genuinely buy. Yeah. So it's such it's that's the positive side, really. Yeah.
It really is. Although, if I may, with a grin, propose a podcast we're going to have in 2-3 years. It's going to be how to recover your brand from over personalization from AI. Because you personalize the way you brand, the uniqueness is gone, everything's personalized. That's actually a threat to your brand as well. You can't personalize too much, or you're not a brand anymore. So that's there's so many new challenges, and it's really exciting to navigate them, if I may say so.
Yeah, you still want to know what's out there.
Yes, 100%.
Okay, so what advice then can you give to any brand wanting to start out on their data-driven personalization journey before it becomes too personalized?
Isn't that the old, I think it's Chinese proverb that the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is right now. So I think start now is the number one advice. Get advice and understand what you're doing so that you're not getting legal trouble. And just get a baseline operation going. You need to collect data. If you're not collecting data, start there. If collecting data, then analyze it. If you're collecting and analyzing, then use the outcome of your analysis. It's like, and if you're already using the outcome of your analysis, test to make your analysis stronger, and then keep learning. It's like increment upon increment until you hit the loop, where you learn about your customers, who sharpens your targeting, that sharpens your knowledge, that sharpens your targeting, and you have the positive feedback loop going. But don't forget that it's your value proposition to your customers that in the end drives your outcome, that in your brand, not necessarily just your messaging. So let's not forget we are marketeers and we are responsible for delivering a good service as well.
I think I completely concur with everything that Paul has just said there. I think what I would add to that is that we need to consider this as an always-on business process. This is not, personalization is not a marketing campaign that you run for 3 months or 6 months or even 12 months. If you're not planning to build it into your business, frankly, don't bother. Full-on personalization, and if you're going to sort of drive the sorts of benefits for your customers and for yourselves as an organization, you have to build it into your core business processes, which means it's implicit that it becomes an always-on activity.
Yes.
So it's always on, but who do you hire, or do you do it yourself?
You need a subjective idea about what it is you're going to do. Hopefully that will fall out of your business strategy, your objectives, and your marketing strategy. Doing some research based on your own first-party data and the third-party data sources to inform how you're going to go about this is probably the second step. But then, whether it's the same agency that you engage for that resource, if it's a full-service agency like Finn, obviously you can do that. But the third step really is having trusted specialist partners who have the right skills to understand and to be able to translate that marketing strategy into tactics that will work on the sorts of channels and the sorts of tools that you need to actually implement this stuff on a practical level. And the reason you need that trust is because, as Paul said, a lot of marketing automation and personalization, particularly early on, is about experimentation. Yeah. So you've got to give the space and the time and the trust to these partners that you're bringing in, so that they can start to develop results, and then you get the feedback that we're talking about, and then you start to really see the dividends and the return on investment that you will get from these activities. Yeah.
So just so we're clear about how such a partnership would work. So you've got Wagamamas, you've got yourself, you're an expert in the field, so you already know a lot, and that's brilliant. I'm absolutely brilliant for Wagamama. And then you've got the specialists, marketing and digital and SEO and all of that with the agency Finn. How would you work together and balance out who does what, so it's maximum efficiency?
Yeah, so Paul and I have been working together for years, and it's an absolute pleasure. And the point is, those touch points, it's a function of how the brand or the organization is set up internally. I mean, not every organization is blessed to have someone as capable and as knowledgeable as Paul, but clearly he can take ownership for large chunks of this strategy. And in the case of Wagamama, our tactical specialists are working very closely with Paul and his team to deploy those tactics. In other cases, there's more consultative and strategic advice that brands and organizations will need. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's about how that brand and organization is set up from day one, and if developing those in-house skills is part of the objectives of that brand and organization, certainly the way our agency will work is we will build that into the program, right? So the knowledge transfer as we grow along, as we're experimenting, as we're gaining feedback from the data that comes back from these activities, transferring that knowledge in-house is a big part of many of the projects that we run with our partners and clients.
Yeah. 100%, and it's been a pleasure to work with Finn Partners as well. They're our SEO agency for listeners. When we started working with them, just to give I think a well-deserved testimonial, our superstar dish, chicken katsu curry, was on page 7 of Google. I think ranked 75th or something. It's ridiculous. Wagamama can't allow that to happen. So it took them about 6 to 9 months to get us to hovering around spot 1, occasionally dropping down to 3rd or 4th, but it's we are where we need to be now, and that and a lot of other positive has been done by the Finn team. And the way to work with an agency is obviously I like to have a called planning session and sparring matches where I bring they might come and say we should do this, and then I might have read something in an article, but what about that? Why aren't we doing that? And then they may sometimes say, okay, it's because of this, or actually that's a good idea, let's research it. And usually they have very strong recommendations, which of course I'm the blocker for, because they often have deliver what we should be doing, at which point I have to pivot that in-house and brief all the teams, which of course takes time and can be slow moving. So that's one of the challenges, but that's also one challenge to you could in theory use AI to get around over time. To distribute briefs and organize work.
If it's safe enough, yes.
If it's safe enough, of course, yes.
Yeah, but you're right. It takes a lot of time and effort to crunch through all this data to make the informed decisions, and somebody has to do it. I mean, if you want to be as sort of polished and brilliant in this area as you can be, so handing it or having an agency to help is useful. Yeah. And then, of course, having someone like yourself within the company that can give that direction is also...
It's key. I also think when we go back to more pure data-driven marketing, I think working with an external party, you have to have very rigorous legal processes to make sure that in the event that you're working with partners who could actually see some of your customer data, there's a very strong legal framework and access framework in place. And I always like to use the metaphor, I like to work with partners where the mechanic comes to my house. I don't want to bring our data to your repair shop. I want you to come and work in our garage because that's where it's safe. That goes for performance marketing and media buying. That goes for obviously CRM and data. So it's all about having trust, right access control, and the legal and contractual bits and pieces in place.
Elliott and Paul, thank you so much for joining us on the Affinity Podcast.
Thank you for having me.